If you're a business owner or executive and you've been in your industry for a while, but you don't think that content has a value to you, go ahead and watch this video because my goal is to show you that it's actually one of the best things you can do in 2026. What's up, guys? Hope everybody is having a great day. I have a concept here that I've been using for the last 3 years in my company that I use for my clients, and it's called the known credible paradox. And so I really wanted to break it down to really show you why, if you're somebody who's been in your industry for a very long time, content is one of the best things that you can do in 2026. So when we look at the known credible paradox, I think that everybody is some form of known and everybody is some form of credible. And so it's important for you to understand if you're known in your industry and if you're credible. Now, being known is something that can be considered relative. Being credible, not as much. I think that credibility is something that you have to develop over time. And so we're actually going to talk about that a little bit later. But if you're not known and you're not credible, unfortunately, you just get forgotten in the industry, right? And so if you're somebody building a business, building your personal brand, I really don't think that these people necessarily even apply to anything that you're doing. So we don't even worry about those people, but if you're not known and you're not credible, this is the sector or the quadrant that you fill in. And then you have people who are known, but then you have people who are not credible, and they're looked at as scams in their industry. So think a lot of times about like social media, where you'll see somebody just pop up out of nowhere in an industry, and all of a sudden you'll see they have a big following, and all of a sudden you'll see that they're throwing events. All of a sudden you'll see in their marketing that they've ran all these companies or that they own all these companies. What happens there is they get known so fast, but they're not necessarily credible. And because of how fast they move through an industry or grow, people always look at them as a scam. I know that this happens a lot on social media when it comes to people who used to be salesmen of companies, and then they tell you they ran their own company, and now all of a sudden you see them flashing luxury cars and luxury watches. And anybody who's a legitimate business person and an actual practitioner usually looks at that person and goes, something's up there. They're not telling us the whole story. So if you're known and not credible, unfortunately, this is how you're going to be looked at in the industry. So we have the next two, and I think that these next two really apply to any legitimate business owners out there, any legitimate executives. I'm not talking about the people who coach coaches on how to coach coaches. I'm talking about the people who have actual businesses that you can go tangibly see and go talk to. You can talk to their clients, and it's not something that's kept behind closed doors in the process. So if you're known and you're credible, you'll be viewed as a thought leader. And the first example that really comes to my mind when I think about a thought leader is the show Shark Tank, right? So a while back when they first started Shark Tank, I would say, as somebody who loves the show, I would say that not a lot of people knew the judges on Shark Tank. Everybody knew Mark Cuban, but like Robert Herjavec, Kevin O'Leary, those guys, the standard public had no idea who those people were. But because they already had credibility, the content that they started creating, how they started promoting their personal brands, caused them to be known. And what elevated them to the next level is they were some of the few people who were credible, who were actually making themselves known. And so that's why if you look at Shark Tank in the past, I know I do this. Anytime I saw a guest judge, I would go right to the internet and I would see what they did. And that would give you a good idea of like their track record and their credibility. But because they were already credible, and then they decided to make themselves known through promoting their personal brands and creating content, now a lot of those people in the news and the media are the go-to thought leaders when it comes to business, trending topics, when it comes to things relating to government, relating to politics, all because they use their credibility and they decided to become known in the process. Now, this last section is where I think a lot of legitimate business owners are, a lot of legitimate executives are, and I think that oftentimes these are the people that creating content and being known is really going to help. And so it's the people who are credible and not known, and I call them the game changers. And the reason I call them the game changers is because these are the people who have put a lot of experience into the industry. These are the people who have the connections. These are the people who have a track record. It's just not known to the masses of people who need to know them. And so I think that these people really have the ability to separate themselves from others in 2026 and beyond, because they already have the foundation there as far as being credible. They're just not known. And so when it comes to all of this, 3 takeaways I want anybody who's watching this who feels like they're a game changer to take with them is, the first thing I want you to ask is, do people associate what I do with who I am? And so I had a eye-opening experience probably 3 years ago where I was talking to my friend and they had their own law firm, and I was talking to them, and all of a sudden they were like, yeah, we're getting ready to do some marketing. And I was like, oh, nice. And they were like, yeah, we just hired a marketing firm. And this was back in like 2022, but it really caught me off guard at first because I thought that they were trying to sideswipe me. But then the more and more I talked to them, my buddy basically said, hey, I would have contacted you first. I just didn't know that this is what you do. And so that's why to this day, I focus on making content all over the place. I focus on making as much content because, like I've told you before, I'm not worried about going viral. I'm not worried about a lot of views. I'm focused on creating leverage to the people who need to know me. That way, whenever they have a problem, I'm the first person that they call. So ask yourself that when you think about making content. If you say you're on the fence still, just ask yourself, do people associate what I do with who I am? And so the second thing I want you to remember is that you are already ahead of everybody else because credibility takes time. And if you don't believe me, go look at whenever you as an executive or legitimate business owner posts on Facebook about your business, or you post on LinkedIn. Go look at all the comments and engagement you get from your personal page. What that tells you is that you've actually accomplished some things in the real business world. It tells me that people are engaged with your following. And so if you get engagement like that, posting every once in a while, why not double down on that so that the people who need to know you can find out who you are? There's a saying in business where they say it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. But I always learned, especially when I was going through college and through the NFL process, it's not about what you know, and it's really not about who you know, but it's about who knows you. And so just remember that whenever you're creating content, is that because you have credibility takes time, which already puts you ahead of everybody else. And then the last one is, what can I do to separate myself from others? And I would add today, right? I think that everybody's always focused on trending hacks and tricks on social media. But the best thing you can do when it comes to creating content to separate yourself is to talk about things that you've actually applied in the real world. Talk about things that you've applied that have actually made you or the people who work with you successful. Because if you do that, that's automatically going to add credibility to what you're saying, right? Again, there's lots of people, especially in my industry of marketing, who can talk about viral hacks, or they can talk about content or offers or how to run ads, right? But the thing I've doubled down on this year is not necessarily trying to create content like everybody else, even though there are viral hacks. My goal, and the goal I have for anybody watching this video, should be create content that only you can create. That way it automatically can stand alone from all the other content out there. So when you're thinking about doing this, just think about what can you do to separate yourself from others, and creating content that only you can create is the best thing that you can do. So I wanted to go through this. I think that 2026, 2027, and really the next 5 years, when it comes to media, it's going to be one of the greatest assets in the business world because, again, if you're somebody who's credible, it can't be duplicated, but it's something that has leverage because it lasts the test of time. So if you're credible, but you're not known, it's time to get started. Have a great day, and God bless.